fellow Americans.
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting, just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding disinformation? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
Colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organization should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
we become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the
to
problem.
ensure-
We can't even agree. We can't even
extremely-
agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossiers. You can't agree to that. How are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals
So
are
do you
not
think
impinged.
do you think
Number
COVID
one.
do you think
And
COVID
number
do you think
two,
COVID
if I may,
do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over our cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email. And all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
This is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CI director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire We had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about it?
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament, I...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean to the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the President now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the Major's. The Major's assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the President have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a sec." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, "I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show. But if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Hey everybody, welcome to Redacted on this Tuesday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
Where we navigate this clown world together. This is the show that we cover the mainstream media news that they often ignore, that they should be covering, but they don't actually cover it on their shows. We've got a lot of news we're going to get to tonight on your pre-Thanksgiving Day edition of Redacted. We're going to be looking at, well, what did U.S. mission to NATO just report and offer up to Vladimir Zelensky in Ukraine? Is it peace? Come to the table for some sort of a peace negotiation? Well, Ukraine is not having it, but do they have much of a choice? We're going to take you to the very latest on Ukraine in just a few moments.
Plus a war with China. We have two major hints. One, we are pointing missiles at them. We said that. And two, Congress wants more money for a war with China. It's not subtle, those hints. They're not very subtle hints.
And Justin Trudeau up in Canada, you know, we wondered, was he really serious when he said last week that, hey, Israel should, you know, really slow their roll in Gaza and really pull back on this? Is he trying to pander for votes in Canada? Well, he is doubling down on his position against Israel. We will look at that.
Plus, yesterday was Transgender Remembrance Day. The White House commemorated this with some announcements and some speeches. This is not how you're going to prevent more deaths of transgender people. We're going to look at actually how and why these people were killed and why the White House is completely ignoring the real reason. Once again, proving they don't give a shit about those people actually. They just want a signal that they do.
And Congress also doesn't give a shit about the child trafficking problem in the United States. Why is the United States the largest trafficker of children in the world? Why is that? Why is the United States trafficking children? And under the watchful eye of the Biden administration, we're going to speak to a whistleblower tonight on the show who will astonish you with what he has blown the whistle on inside the government and the Biden administration's response to the child trafficking in the United States. All of that and more as Redacted starts right now.
All right. Well, I said the S word. I try not to curse because we get emails about it, but I meant it.
Look,
yeah.
I'm from Philadelphia. I don't know that matters, but sometimes you get frustrated with the state of things, and you need to let loose a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It's okay.
Sometimes I tell my kids that's an energetic choice, and sometimes there's no stronger energy, and you need the strong words. This is how I feel about how the White House feels about transgender issues, and we're going to get to that. We have a lot to get to. This is a story that was in this morning's newsletter. Did you catch it? The daily newsletter comes out Monday through Thursday, every day that this show comes out, although we won't have newsletters or shows Wednesday and Thursday of this week because it is Thanksgiving week. But we want to tell you to please still subscribe to the newsletter. It's at redacted.inc. It's totally free. There's no level of upselling we will do, I promise you.
And we don't sell your email address. It's totally free.
We don't sell your email address, and we don't ask you to pay for any extra layer of news. There's nothing behind a paywall. This is something we do for you, totally free, just like the show, every single day. So, it's a lot of the things that we cover in this show so that you can see for yourself. Think for yourself, read, and come up with your own opinion. And then you know what we're going to talk about and where we found our sources by the time you get here. So it's a companion piece for the Redacted show, is the free Redacted newsletter, both of them free because we love it, because we love what we do. We love the opportunity to bring news to you. Clayton and I are news veterans, and this is a project of passion. We believe that it's important to share real information in the world. So again, you can find it at redacted.inc. Once again, that's redacted.inc.
Well, the West is now telling Ukraine, game over, your time is up. Over the past 24 hours, the U.S. mission to NATO released this statement to Ukraine, basically telling them it's time to negotiate a peace agreement. And even the warmongers on MSNBC admitted yesterday that Russia has won this war. Time to pack it in, time to go home. Listen.
2 or 3 more years of this is going to result in success. I simply don't see it. Russia's on a war footing. They have access also to arms from North Korea and Iran. So I just think, anytime in foreign policy, anytime in life, there's a big gap between what you're trying to do and your ability to do it. You've either got to increase your means or lower your goals. And I think here the only realistic option as a tactical measure is to lower our goals.
So is Ukraine about to finally admit defeat, actually come to the table, negotiate a peace agreement? Maybe we could get this before Christmas, before more young men or 75-year-old Ukrainian soldiers have to die in this war. Let's bring in former U.S. Marine, former UN Weapons Inspector Scott Ritter to talk about this. Scott, you've been predicting this. Well, you've been saying that this war has been over for months, so all that's left really is the fighting and sort of the crying at this stage, and that seems to be what's left. Do you think that this is a moment when NATO is pushing for a peace agreement? Will they actually come to the table?
You know, what we have to look at here is that we've got the West starting to put pressure on Ukraine for a negotiated into this conflict. Nowhere in there do you hear the term Russia, other than acknowledgement of Russia winning. Russia's not going to negotiate. I don't know what the West thinks is happening here. The time for negotiation has passed. The Russians have said this. Russia had kept the door open for negotiation all through the fall of last year, all through the spring of this year, even early summer. But when the West doubled down on stupid by throwing billions of dollars worth of equipment into encouraging this counteroffensive that has cost Ukraine so dearly, and it's cost Russia. What people don't understand is, while the Russians talk about 90,000 Ukrainian casualties, Vladimir Putin has said that it's a 10-to-1 ratio. That's 9,000 Russian casualties. 9,000. That's not a drop in the bucket.
And this is just the counteroffensive we're talking about, the 90,000.
That's right. We're not talking about the whole war,
right?
Which, by some estimates, could be between 30 and 40,000 Russian dead, maybe 100,000 Russian casualties overall. Russia's not going to disgrace the sacrifice made by those soldiers by going to a negotiation with Ukraine. There will be no negotiation. I've said this all along. It will be a Battleship Missouri moment. Ukraine will be given an opportunity to come to a table and sign a document that has been prepared by Russia, which outlines its demands, not requests, demands regarding this. Now, Russia will be very reasonable. You can, people say, how do you know? Well, one only has to take a look at the negotiated agreement they came to back in March of 2020, which could have stopped this war, by the way, could have ended it on 1 April. 400,000 Ukrainian troops would be alive today. 20 million Ukrainians would not be displaced from their homes. Children would have schools to go to. An economy might be functioning. But no, Ukraine threw it away at the behest of the West. Russia will never offer those terms again. So, yes, it's nice that the West has come to this realization that they have lost. What they have done is sacrificed Ukraine. They've used Ukraine as a tool. That tool is no longer useful, and they're seeking to discard it in a way that's convenient for the West. The other thing is Zelensky, I don't believe, is capable of a negotiation. He has poured so much political capital into, this stance that he will somehow be the Messiah that saves Ukraine, that with his leadership, the Ukrainian army can recapture the lost territory. And all that's happened is that he has subjected Ukraine to even more death, destruction. I think Zelensky is going to have to go for there to be any chance of conflict termination. And we see this already happening within Ukraine. The split between Zelensky and his senior military, including General Zelensky, is real. Zelensky is taken to ostracizing Zelensky, warning him not to get involved in politics. But Zelensky is an isolated man. If you look at the videotape of him sitting alone with the American delegation led by Lloyd Austin, and the literal crazy look on his face as he talks about Joe Biden's birthday. This is a man who is totally out of touch with reality. I think he's the problem now. And so I think what we're looking at right now is the West setting the conditions for the removal of Zelensky. And once you remove Zelensky, then you can get somebody who will be willing to approach the table of surrender, because that's where we're at right now. This will not be a negotiated settlement. This is a surrender, unconditional surrender of Ukraine to Russia.
Fascinating. And, over the past 24 hours, we've also seen out of Ukraine that well, according to RT today, Ukraine is concerned by Western push for peace talks, according to this story, that they are specifically saying that this is irrational. This idea of the West is now calling for peace, basically calling it irrational and an irrational fear of Russia. And Ukraine is, so these people that are surrounding Zelensky, are they delusional? You have this Alexei Danilov, the Secretary of Ukraine's National Security Service, saying that this is irrational, that we should be fearful of Russia, and the West must keep supporting Kiev if it wants to keep ruling the world, basically a threat to the United States. You know, your time is up unless you support Ukraine.
Well, I mean, this is part of the arrogance of the Zelensky regime. But you can't blame them. They have been coddled by the West into believing they are the most important nation in the world, that the world revolves around Ukraine. If you go back and listen to the statements made by Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, that a defeat for Ukraine is a defeat for NATO, that this is an existential struggle of the West against Russia. That's how the West has justified this conflict from the very beginning, especially in terms of the counteroffensive. And Ukraine was foolish enough to believe this, to believe that they are that important. But as I have said from day one, Ukraine is not important. The West does not care about Ukraine. The West will throw Ukraine to the side the moment Ukraine stops being useful to the West, and Ukraine has stopped being useful to the West. Danilov and the other advisors, they have no future. They have no future whatsoever. And this could get extreme, meaning they don't have a chance to live, physically survive this conflict if the West abandons them. They have gone so far out on the ledge. They are responsible for so many crimes. Remember, when Russia wins, and Russia will win, they are winning, there will be justice for the murders, the crimes of the Azov battalion. I know the West has tried to forget about Azov, but it's a reality. Their crimes are real. And those who perpetrated those crimes will be brought to justice, and those who facilitated those crimes politically. And that is Zelensky, that is Danilov, that is all these others. They have literally no future. So their only chance for continued, not just relevance, but survival is to continue to have the West prop up the Ukrainian regime. And what they're seeing right now is the West refuses, or it's not just refuses, the West can't continue to prop it up. There's nothing left to give Ukraine. If the Biden administration talked about $100 million worth of equipment coming in aid, in that is one HIMARS launcher. That's it. That's all we got left to give. The Germans are talking about some billions of dollars worth of equipment, but the number one ticket there, 10 Leopard tanks, but not even the new ones. These are the old Leopard 1A5s. They're not survivable on a modern battlefield, and yet that's all Germany has left to give. The West has nothing left to give Ukraine, and they're not willing to dig deeper. Why? Well, in the case of the United States, there's this thing called Israel. Israel's at a war with Hamas right now. Israel is getting all the artillery ammunition that it needs. And if you remember, Joe Biden, a while back when asked why we're giving Ukraine cluster munitions, he said, we don't have anything left. Now put yourself in the Ukrainian shoes, and they say, well, wait a minute, you said you didn't have anything left, but Israel right now is getting hundreds of thousands of 155 millimeter conventional high explosive rounds. Where'd those come from? We're giving Israel the stocks from our stockpiles, the weapons we need if we go to war, because Israel actually is important to us. Ukraine was not important enough for us to give them our stockpiles. We gave them our reserves, and now that our reserves are depleted, we will give them nothing more. And that is a further signal to Ukraine that they just aren't important to the West anymore. They've outlived their usefulness. We now need them to quietly disappear.
It's like giving out a birthday cake where pieces of the icing fall off, and you give that piece of the cake to Ukraine, and you give the nice piece of the cake to Israel, like the one with all of that extra icing and the little decorations that my daughter would always want. That's Israel. They get the nice icing on the cake. So then yesterday, when you have Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin showing up in Kiev, what do you make of that trip? He shows up there, and offers up this $100 million package on the very same day that the U.S. mission to NATO basically says, come to the table for peace. What do you make of those secret behind? I mean, to be a fly on the wall yesterday in Kiev, what would you have seen, do you think?
I think what they're seeing is that it's over. There's nothing left to give. If you continue down this path, you will fail. Russia has won, and we're not willing to invest the political capital, the financial capital, the military capital into a losing cause. That the assessment is that we can't turn this around, and the best choice right now is for you to seek peace. I would hope they would also have the intellectual honesty to tell Zelensky that if you continue this fight, the 20% that you've lost could very well become 40 or 50% of your territory. That to continue this struggle to the bitter end will be a very bitter pill for Ukraine to swallow, because if Russia, the reality is the Ukrainian army is on the verge of collapse. This is acknowledged across the board. And if they collapse, there will be a precipitous withdrawal. And the Russians will fill that vacuum. And once they fill that vacuum, that territory will probably not be given back to Ukraine. And this is the reality. Right now, Ukraine is able to maintain some sort of continuity and cohesion on the line of contact. But their reserves are gone. Their stockpiles are gone. They have no more troops. They're sending 54-year-old women to the front lines right now. They've sent pregnant women to the front lines. They've sent women. The Russians now are taking over the trench lines where they killed the Ukrainian defenders, and they're finding, significant numbers of women in the front lines, dead now, killed, murdered. Not murdered, but war is murder, I guess. So yeah, murdered. There's nothing there. And when the army collapses, Russia will be able to rapidly take control of territory, which they'll never give back. And so I think what we're telling, I hope what Lloyd Austin is telling Zelensky is, this is the best it's ever going to get for you today. It will never be better than it is today. And today's pretty bad. Tomorrow will be worse. And every day after will be worse. And there's nothing we can do to alter this outcome. So your best bet now is to find a way to terminate this conflict on your best day, because it's just going to get worse.
Oh, well, hopefully they'll come to the table, and hopefully maybe we'll have some sort of an agreed upon surrender, unconditional surrender and peace. And the remaining people that live in Ukraine who've been dragged kicking and screaming to the front lines could actually have their lives. They could have had their lives, hundreds of thousands of them, if this had been stopped until the United States and Boris Johnson managed to stick their neck into all of this. Scott Ritter, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it in making sense of this trip yesterday from Lloyd Austin and this message from NATO. Hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving with your family. Thanks so much, Scott.
Thank you, and you as well.
Thanks so much, Scott, and appreciate it.
Grief.
I mean, to think about the women, like what Scott, I'm just sitting here like, and I see the response here in the chat right now, and it's just unbelievable. And, you think about these women, there's no military left. The entire generation has been wiped away. Right. The entire generation of young people has been wiped away. And then, I don't know if you saw the video yesterday, it's been circulating. We were looking at it yesterday. And it's about a month old. This video emerged showing Ukrainian soldiers sitting in like a theater where there's like a woman, almost like a USO kind of a singer, like a woman singer trying to like boost the morale of the troops. And there's like not a Ukrainian Marilyn Monroe type act. And they're all just like dejected. They're probably thankful to be like sitting in like a warm theater. And they're not young. No, they're all old. We've reported recently from Time Magazine the average age of the soldier is 43. And these faces, and they're clearly not, or they're just weathered by war, but they're not 43. And I mean, and women and pregnant women on the front lines. I mean, to hear the response from the Ukrainians over the past 24 hours to this NATO message is really upsetting, because here what NATO is basically saying is what Scott just said. You're out of time.
Yeah, take this off ramp.
There's no better time than right now. There's no better deal coming like next week or after Christmas. No, what's going to happen after Christmas is you'll lose more land and more people will die. So here's an opportunity for peace right now. Just a suggestion.
That makes it sound like they're just going to the front lines with no training, because what kind of pregnant woman is going to go through some kind of basic training and climbing walls and doing all that stuff? Like, are they just sending him like, here you go, head on to the front lines. Here's a gun.
Well, no, we've had reports for months now that the soldiers get very little to no training. They get manuals in English that they can't read. They're using Google Translate to figure out how to use the weapons that we've sent, even though Zelensky went before Congress and said, we know what we're doing. We don't need any help, which was obviously a lie and part of propaganda in order to get the West to continue to send weapons and money that it does not have to spend lives like money.
And someone in the chat just said, where's Victoria Nuland? Where has Victoria Nuland been during all of this? Of course, she's the one that started this.
Yeah.
She's the one there that helped to create this government, fomented a coup in this government. So she's got to be sitting there saying, man, I mean, does she see this as a success at this point? Because all of these large, massive, United States corporations or international corporations have now bought up so much of Ukraine.
Right.
So Microsoft, BlackRock, all of these big corporations, of course, have come in now, bought up land, bought up resources, and it's a garrison state for NATO at this point. But when they surrender, Russia's not going to allow it to be a garrison NATO state. It will be gobbled up. There will be an end of the Zelensky government. What will Poland do when this collapses? They're going to definitely want a say in this, as it borders their country, of course. What's going to happen here?
Well, we had the memo from the State Department talking about how the reason we wanted Ukraine so badly was to get out the Russian oligarchs and put in the American oligarchs, which they don't call oligarchs, they call American private interests. So whether or not that would actually happen, that's not even going to happen. So you're going to lose all of these lives and still not get your, your franchise, your American franchise that you wanted in Eastern Europe.
Just terrifying. People say, awful. Victoria Nuland's on vacation. I saw someone in the chat just say that. Yeah.
Oh, do you follow her on Insta? Is that how you know that?
She's got to get ready. Can you imagine going to Victoria Nuland's house for Thanksgiving?
No.
Like a Death Eater?
No, like Dick Cheney.
It's like going to Satan's house. You want to come over to Satan's house?
I wouldn't be able to make niceties with those people. God. So you lie for a living and people die.
What happens if a kid spills milk? I mean, like scorched earth, like she sets fire to the table and
that kid disappears.
Neighbor come over and yeah, exactly. The neighbor comes over and disappears the kid.
Yeah.
Damn.
The parents are like, you realize I'm going to be disappeared now thanks to Victoria Nuland.
I like to think I'm the kind of person who can break bread with anybody, but I don't think that that I could leave politics behind and just be nice to people on the basis of being in their presence. But I don't think like these warmongers who lie and.
No, could you imagine like John Bolton, Victoria Nuland, all of these warmongers sitting around a Thanksgiving table?
Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Dick Cheney.
And they will all look
the list is growing. Madeleine Albright.
Yeah. They will all look at each other and smile and pretend that they're taking their Christmas cards and they're taking their holiday pictures and they're handing around a turkey and a ham and all of this stuff, and they've literally killed millions of people. Like, it's unbelievable, but this is the state of play right now.
But this is a leftist playbook, right? That we can't even talk to people that we disagree with. So we would have to, in theory, say that we could do it.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll think about that over the holiday break. Would I do that? But I've not been invited.
How many of you guys?
To any of those?
How many of you guys would invite Ambassador Bolton or Victoria Nuland to your house for Thanksgiving dinner? Let us know in the chat. We've got a lot more news to get to. We're going to talk about war in China, what the United States is prepping for in that regard. Trudeau versus Israel. Justin Trudeau doubling down on his apparent sudden hatred of Israel. Like, where the hell did that come from? Overnight, he's sort of had a change of heart about that. I guess he's pandering to Muslims up in Canada because he needs some votes. We're also going to look at Trans Day of Remembrance. I don't know, did you honor transgender individuals in the United States who passed away over the last 20 years? Yesterday was a Trans Day of Remembrance. I didn't know about that. I didn't get the memo, but the White House took time out of their day to make sure that you knew about it. We'll get to all of that. But first, I'm going to tell you about our friends over at Nom Nom, because I love my dog. I hope you love your dogs as well. In fact, if you were a subscriber to our daily newsletter today, you would have seen a picture of Grover, my favorite dog, who's my dog. And he's had a little bit of a respiratory cough or what? He's had a cough.
He's had a cold.
He's had a cold, like
a doggy cold.
He's had a doggy cold, like yeah, I guess. Anyway, so our friends over at Nom Nom have delicious food delivered right to your door for your pet. Your pet is a member of the family. Don't feed them like they're a dog in the house, right? Give them Nom Nom. And what we want to say is Nom Nom delivers fresh dog food with every portion personalized to your dog's needs, so you can bring out their best. And Nom Nom's made with real whole food, which you can see and recognize. I just got done reading a whole book by a heart doctor on why we should all eat whole foods. So why wouldn't you feed that to your dogs as well? You want to give them processed garbage that's going to make them sick and unhealthy? And they don't have any additives, no fillers, no, all of that stuff contributes to bloating and low energy and also all sorts of disease on top of it. So they don't do any of that. And here's what you can do. You get 50% off. No risk, 2-week trial. 50% off. Just try it. Think about the delicious food you can be getting for your dogs. Go to trynom.com/redacted right now for 50% off your no risk 2-week trial. Try Nom, that's TRYNOM.com/redacted for 50% off. And it's shipped free right to your door. That's right. Shipped free right to your door.
Well, we've been warning about a war with China. This week, it is confirmed by 2 major hints. 1, we're pointing missiles at them. And 2, Republicans confirmed it in a request for more money. So where should we start? With the many other weapons? I guess we'll start with the weapons, because that's the most exciting part, I suppose.
For them.
Yeah, I suppose. The Army announced that they would deploy new medium-range missiles to the Pacific next year to deter China from invading Taiwan. So we're going to tell you, don't do this because we have guns pointed at your head, and that's what we want you to not do. By medium range, they say it's 2,500 kilometers. So that's quite a long range. The Army says that this is allowed because the United States has withdrawn from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Force Treaty. Here's from Defense One, which is a military publication, saying that the deployment of these land-based Tomahawks, whose variant can range up to 2,500 kilometers, used to be forbidden under the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty until the U.S. withdrew in 2019, citing Russian noncompliance. The Marine Corps stood up its first Tomahawk battery in July at Camp Pendleton. Flynn, this is a General Flynn, not Michael Flynn, said these missiles might be followed by the Army's precision strike missile. So it's a 1-2 punch. So we can say they're more like it's like a chaser, like a bomb chaser. Okay, so first is precision strike. We're going to talk about what that is in a second. And then it's these medium range. Well, lucky us, we no longer have to follow those rules since we found a way to blame Russia for the rules we don't want to follow anyway. Except at the time in 2019, when the U.S. withdrew from this treaty, the Trump administration flat out said they were withdrawing because they wanted to make these weapons because of China. Here's from that same publication from 2020, says the Trump administration said leaving this treaty would allow the deployment and development of these missiles in the Pacific. We said at the time we wanted these to aim at China. So we can blame Russia, and that's convenient. Russia says they did not violate this treaty, and they proved it. The United States says, yes, you did, and we can prove it back. So this is a war of words, but of course it's super convenient because we wanted out of it in order to make these and point them at China. We said just as much. Now, for the last year, Russia has been warning that the U.S. has been prepping these weapons, which were previously banned. And Russia is telling American journalists, please watch this. We're telling you they're doing it. Take a look. Here is Russian Foreign Affairs spokesperson Maria Zakharova on this matter. This was her speaking in the fall of 2023, and it's subtitled. So if you're listening, it's in Russian. You're just going to have to catch it later and read the subtitles.
Мы США демонстративно перешли к задействованию, практически готовы к применению комплекса пусковой установки МК-70 в рамках военных учений. Они проводятся на территории Европы с подключением союзников США и союзников США по НАТО. И таким образом Вашингтон просто приступил фактически к обработке действий по переброске на Европейский театр военных действий ракетных систем, ранее запрещенных по целенаправленно разрушенному Вашингтоном договору о РСМД. В контексте объявленного Россией одностороннего моратория на размещение РСМД наземного базирования мы самым внимательным образом отслеживаем любые шаги США по реализации дестабилизирующих планов, которые предполагают развертывание указанных вооружений. Хотелось бы напомнить, что жизнеспособность российского моратория напрямую связана с появлением в соответствующих регионах американских ракет упомянутого комплекса. И очень хотелось бы, чтобы на эту информацию обратили внимание американские средства массовой информации, журналисты, для которых бы потом не стало сюрпризом что-нибудь.
Okay, so what she said is pay attention to this so you're not surprised later. We had this treaty, you pulled out, now you're using these. Watch what your own government is doing. Well, we're watching. So those same contested weapons that we insist we cannot use, by we I mean Americans, we're using them. And the Army says, again, it's like a chaser to precision strike missiles. Well, what's that? Oh, well, Lockheed Martin is glad that you asked what a precision strike missile is, because just a few days ago they ran a test, and here's a video about them bragging about it. Watch. Great killing
hot beats there.
Yes, we're gonna go kill some people.
That is music to mass murder too, if I've ever heard it.
Right. It's like that was like a Rocky IV training montage. You know, like that's like Ivan Drago like lifting or something.
You want to go lift some weights?
Yeah.
Is that what that meant?
That's what that is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, did you notice that the video said that Lockheed Martin successfully launched these PRSMs, these precision strike missiles? Well, okay, but in a press release about this, the Army said they didn't use the word success. Take a look at the word that they used. They performed nominally. That's not the same.
That was like me in high school.
What do you mean? Like your grades or
performed
is that a sex
nominally?
joke?
No. Well,
okay.
No. I excelled.
All right, I wasn't sure where you're going with that because they're talking about bombs and they're kind of phallic and okay, all right, I went there. Okay,
see where you're.
Let's bring it back. Let me try and bring it back. So again, they're saying they're ready to go, and the Army's saying this is nominal performance. Is that the standard you should go for if you're launching bombs?
I mean,
nominal.
Do they have to be precise? I mean, right? The thing that
it's literally in their title is precision,
right? So what we mean by precise is when we're really targeting this particular oil refinery, what we may end up hitting is a school. So that's nominally successful. Like it was about
within range.
It was 300 yards away. We were nominally successful with it.
They're like, it's slightly closer than we were with the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Like it's not 30 miles off. It's like 10.
We're getting there.
15. Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah. It's like your Uber driver made a wrong turn kind of a thing.
Okay. Well, that's not so encouraging considering we're talking about death. I mean, it's kind of funny because the word is precision strike and they're saying it's nominal. Like precision can't be nominal. It can't.
Right.
Those words don't work together.
It's like saying it's basically precise. It's pretty much precise.
You cannot say that.
McMental Music Makers in our chat says nominal is 0.
It's and so it's like
yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if you want to feel so good about what Lockheed Martin is doing with our tax dollars. But I can't just let them get away with the word precision in weapons like this because one, if they're performing nominally, there's nothing precise about it. But two, I want to remind you of this term precision paradox because precision strike is something that was coined during the Obama years to trick us into thinking that only bad guys get hurt. Obviously, that's not true. That's why we have this term precision paradox. It's a situation in which the failed promise of a precision strike, one kill, generates a creeping wave of destruction. Raise your hand if you like those words, creeping wave of destruction. because that's what we're going to get with these nominally successful missiles. Okay, so we've got the missiles. Let's get to the money. Let's get to the conditions at which we use said missiles. General Charles Flynn, not to be confused with Michael Flynn, said, we don't know if we'll need them yet, but just in case. He said this is really contingent on China's behavior, and he gave us 3 things that it's contingent of. You can sort of read along here, and I'm going to summarize. Number 1, this weird thing about Russia saying, well, it depends on how they behave around Russian sanctions. Why would we bomb China if they're not doing good with Russian sanctions? I'm not sure. Number 2, because in August, Xi Jinping replaced several top generals from the Chinese rocket force, so that might be something we use to feel threatened. And number 3, elections in Taiwan. If China keeps up the misinformation, we may have to nuke them. Sorry, not sorry, is basically the sort of sentiment of these quotes. Maybe you read it differently than me. Let me know. Now, Congress likes this plan, or at least Republicans do, and their war-loving poster girl, Nikki Haley. She loves to talk war in China. She wants it so badly she can taste it. She'll want for nothing else if we give her a war with China in life. That's what I would say. Now, on November 19th, 6 House Republicans sent this letter to Congress asking for an additional $12 billion to prep for a war with China. Now, notice they're saying that the administration thinks here that we need increased funding for the Indo-Pacific, and the administration's strategy says that we're entering a decisive decade. So they're here saying we agree with the Biden administration. We're with you. We absolutely want on board with a war with China. Notice the bipartisan nature of this letter. This is from Republicans agreeing with the Biden administration that, yes,
of course they want war.
China is a big problem. Don't worry, though. They see all of these weapons as a deterrence. Here's what they say. And they think that, this is our vision for peace, is prepping for war. I just cropped it that way so you can see all the signatories on it, just so you know who to tell who brought this war with China. And what they say at the top, that this is in order to safeguard peace. They say, while deterrence may be hard, war is hell. Again, they almost say this while foaming at the mouth, it would seem. So, these are not subtle hints that your government, if you're an American, really, really wants a war with China, is provoking such, moving in that direction, prepping for it, and using these nominally successful precision bombs. But I thought that, we were mending fences with China. Last week, President Xi Jinping met with President Biden. They acted friendly together. They talked about economic cooperation. Was that all for naught? Well, I guess we'll let Secretary of State Antony Blinken's body language show you how that went. After what Blinken thought was a day of successful relations building, which would, by the way, make his job 5,000% easier, the president went on and called Chinese President Xi Jinping a dictator. You have to, if you haven't seen this video, I watched it like 20 times because it's so priceless. Watch Antony Blinken's face, hoping that maybe his job will just get a little bit easier and the president will just mend fences and he won't have to lie in order to get a war with China. And then look how he knows, nope, it's not going to go that way.
Mr. President, after today, would you still refer to President Xi as a dictator? This is a term that you used earlier this year.
Well, look, he is. I mean, he's a dictator in the sense that he is the guy who runs a country that is...
Can you play it again? It's so good. I can't get enough of it. It's just
by the way, that's
deflated.
become a meme now, of course,
Yeah.
like in other contexts, like when your wife asks you to take out the trash, you're like, oh God, no.
I think it's funny because you can watch him bracing for it. Like you can see when she asks the question, he's completely bracing for the answer.
Yes.
He's like, he's rocking back and forth like on his butt cheeks. He's like, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it.
Will my life get 1,000,000% easier after this day and I won't have to lie for a war? No.
Yeah, roll it again.
It's not going that way.
Mr. President, after today, would you still refer to President Xi as a dictator? This is a term that you used earlier this year.
Well, look, he is. I mean, he's a dictator in the sense that he is the guy who runs the country that...
The pain in his face, you would almost feel sorry for him.
He's like, I just had a bad oyster. I just feel it. Oh, I'm going to have to duck out of this meeting early.
So, I mean, that almost tells me that he, his job, you think being Secretary of State would be like you fly all over the world, you eat all these interesting cuisines, you shake hands with interesting people. His job is nothing but giving excuses for war and lies. And
he always have to go. Blinken always has to go and sort of walk back things that his boss has said.
Yeah.
Oh, so do you agree with your boss when you talk to, he's a dictator and he's got to look at his notes. He's like, well, I think what he was referring to, and he's got to spin some yarn about what the president actually said.
Yeah, it just is so pitiful. So, maybe we can interpret the hope in his face as if there are people that maybe don't want to continue to wage wars all the time. Maybe. But all actions to the contrary. So let us know how you feel about this extra money for a war with China, how you feel about these new nominal performing bombs, if you're excited about that, and the use of your tax dollar.
So that means we're getting ready to fund 3 wars? They said we could afford 2. I didn't see anything out there saying we could afford 3, but I guess we can afford 3. I guess that's good. That means
we're going to put one of them on layaway.
I think if you look at this language closely, we're sort of weaving Russia and China together as one entity, because we're saying that the general here says if China doesn't behave the way we want them to around economic sanctions levied on Russia, then we might have to bomb China. What does that have to,
it's basically going to be NATO versus BRICS.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, BRICS is not is not supposed to be a defense organization. It's an economic organization, but who knows at this point? Who knows?
Yeah. Well, when I said layaway, and I actually mean that, I think about it now, actually all of the wars that we wage are on layaway. It's buy now, pay later.
Yeah.
And who are we borrowing it from? We're borrowing it from China.
Who we're going to bomb.
Right. Isn't that ironic? We're literally borrowing like 30 to 40% of the money that we use in the United States government from China. And we're going to use that money to fund a war with China. It's very meta.
I would say.
Well, I was listening to somebody talk a couple of days ago about this and how like the U.S. bringing weapons to Taiwan because this person was a scholar in China relations, and he was like, he was a reporter, I can't remember. Anyway, that China basically hasn't made up their mind that they're going to do anything to Taiwan. But the moment the U.S. starts bringing weapons there, then China has to suddenly act quickly to take Taiwan before we get entrenched. And so it's like in doing that, it almost ensures that China attacks Taiwan. And so it's like whereas
it's
now
a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Like NATO and Ukraine.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is exactly what we do. Well, we create Al-Qaeda, we fund Al-Qaeda, then Al-Qaeda does what we basically have paid and wanted to do, and then then it forces us into a war situation. I mean, that's exactly what we're doing here. That's exactly what we've done in Ukraine. It's exactly what we're going to do in all of these countries.
Now, if I were Taiwan, I would look closely at the template that is Ukraine and think really hard if you want that for your future.
Right. Yeah.
That doesn't sound awesome.
You want to be an aircraft carrier for the United States?
And give up your entire generation of young men to die for a war that is started by all the way across the globe. So let us know. Darling, can you please read the next ad so I can...
Okay. Yeah. And all right, we've got a lot more news to get to here. We're going to talk about Justin Trudeau and Israel and the stance there. Really interesting developments out of Canada on that front. We're also going to look at Trans Day of Remembrance. I don't know if you guys celebrated Trans Day of Remembrance yesterday. Karine Jean-Pierre at the White House spent a good portion of her speech time yesterday to remind us all that this is the case. It was a big Trans Day of Remembrance yesterday. It's really amazing what the White House prioritizes right now. And we're also going to look at child trafficking in the United States, why the United States leads the world in child trafficking. But first, I'm going to tell you about our friends over at Bio-Optimizers. And I should point out, our friends, the folks that sponsor our show are amazing because they stand with independent journalism. They stand with the truth. They stand with our show. They could go off and do CNN, which no one watches. They could go off to MSNBC, but they stand with independent journalists, and I really, really support and just want to say thank you during this Thanksgiving week to those sponsors that stand with us. So we really, really appreciate that. And our friends over at BioOptimizers, if you go to biooptimizers.com/redacted, they have a Black Friday mega sale right now. It's happening now. It will last throughout the entire month of November. And listen carefully, because this mega deal is available only for our listeners, only with our code. Now, we all have those ever-growing Black Friday wish lists, but this year I challenge you to make your health a top priority. Instead of those impulse purchases, let's focus on what really matters, a good night's sleep. And Magnesium Breakthrough from BioOptimizers is a true game changer in the quest for a better night's sleep. As you know, because I rave about magnesium all the time, it's the only product I trust. We take it before bed. It combines all 7 critical forms of magnesium into one convenient bottle. And for their Black Friday sale right now, it's lasting through the entire month of November. The biggest discount you can get, amazing gifts, and purchases are only available on our link right here. You have to use our link, biooptimizers.com/redacted, and use the code redacted. This is your golden opportunity to stock up, get a bunch of extras for the year. Again, choose health over unnecessary things this Black Friday. Head over to biooptimizers.com/redacted. Enter the code redacted at checkout. Again, your well-rested, calmer, healthier self will thank you. Again, remember, it's biooptimizers.com/redacted. Use the code redacted. Well, to Canada now, where Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is doubling down once again on his position that Israel has gone too far in Gaza to stop the violence, to stop the killing of babies. His words, you'll recall he said this:
"The human tragedy that is unfolding in Gaza is heart-wrenching, especially the suffering we see in and around the Al-Shifa hospital. I have been clear that the price of justice cannot be the continued suffering of all Palestinian civilians. Even wars have rules. All innocent life is equal in worth, Israeli and Palestinian. I urge the government of Israel to exercise maximum restraint." As the world is watching, on TV, on social media, we're hearing the testimonies of doctors, family members, survivors, kids who've lost their parents. The world is witnessing this, the killing of women and children, of babies. This has to stop.
So a lot of us were stunned that he would call for a ceasefire, call for a pause so that humanitarian aid could arrive and help individuals. We were all sort of stunned by that position. Well, now Prime Minister Trudeau is doubling down on that position. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It wasn't a mistake. David Craden, who writes at the Post Millennial and has the YouTube channel Craden's Right, joins us from Ottawa, Canada. David, when we saw this, we thought, wow, did somebody forget to slip him his medication in the morning? What's going on here? But it appears, no, he's doubling down on this position. Why do you think he's doing this?
Well, it is a bit of a question, and it's a bit of a mystery, because Trudeau, he's rarely not in lockstep with President Joe Biden on foreign policy issues. In fact, he's very much in agreement on domestic issues. I think there's probably one reason he's announcing this so emphatically is that because he has lost so much support in the Muslim community in Canada. I don't say that's the only reason, but it's certainly, in terms of Justin Trudeau, he's not extremely clever. He's not a strategic thinker politically, but he's crafty. And he does think in terms of, how do I win the next election? And he's in serious trouble in the next election. His support is hemorrhaging amongst new immigrants in particular. Most new immigrants, unlike in the past, are voting conservative in the next election, and polling has confirmed that. He has lost a lot of support in the Muslim community because of his extremist social policies on the LGBT question, on gender ideology in the schools. And of course, that was all very much a part of this 1 million person march just a month before this catastrophe in the Middle East, where there was religious unity in Canada against Trudeau's ideology and his extreme positions. Is he worried about losing support amongst the Muslim community in particular? Yes, he is. He's extremely worried. But I have to say this, Clayton. Justin Trudeau runs as a member of parliament in a Montreal riding, Papineau. Any Montreal riding, whether it's majority French or English, is heavily reliant on Jewish voting. So I don't understand what he's trying to do here, although he's already behind one of his competitors in polling in his own riding. That's how bad things are for Justin Trudeau. He might not even win his own seat. So he might be throwing caution to the wind here and saying, I've got to recoup any kind of political loss that I can. And he might be doing that. Is there principle involved? I can't say. But I'm not going to say Justin Trudeau is wrong on this because he's Justin Trudeau. You know, as I have said frequently, and as I wrote on the weekend, and I got a very good response from most of my readers, we need to end this war in the Middle East one way or the other before it becomes a nuclear confrontation, before the U.S. is dragged into this. God knows Canada might be too. And I think anything, even if it's from the lips of Justin Trudeau, a man I rarely ever concur with, I have to say, I think he's basically right on this. It's not a good idea to kill children. It's not a good idea to attack terrorism with more terrorist tactics. And I think I have got to say, in this instance, Justin Trudeau has raised a good point. Maybe for the wrong reasons, but he's raised a good point.
I can see how painful it is for you to admit that. And it was equally painful for us here to admit it as well. Wow, did he actually say that? And so I will give him credit for calling for an end to these attacks and killing innocent people. Absolutely 100%. This does not justify, again, what happened on October 7th and the terrorist attack against the Israeli people. This does not justify that at all. The response is overwhelming and devastating as it pushes into southern Gaza now. So can we please have cooler heads prevail before this turns into a massive regional war and the United States is dragged into some bigger, broader conflict and millions of people die in some sort of a nuclear fallout with Iran. So, of course, none of us want that. You wrote over the weekend that you think that this attack, what's going on here in Israel, is not just a Israeli Hamas attack, but it really is another great reset, another huge distraction, another reason to spend billions of dollars, as you write, in an overseas war. And I think that's why this is so startling, Trudeau's position here, because President Biden over the weekend releases an opinion piece in the Washington Post, and we're all led to believe that he actually wrote it, which is laughable. But it's basically a piece of propaganda pushing for war with Iran. We need to prepare for war with Iran. So Trudeau comes out and says we need to stop this. Biden's saying, get ready, billions of dollars ready to go to war with Iran.
Well, as you said from the very beginning of this conflict, Clayton, this is a case of the globalists playing us for fools. They're playing us big time here. And Justin Trudeau is an acolyte of the World Economic Forum. Right. He is an acolyte of globalism. So I don't know what the game plan is for Justin Trudeau in terms of where he hopes this will go, but I do know that globalists and people like Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden like to use catastrophe, like to use crises, like to use obtruded events like this to exploit them. They like chaos in the streets. They like this sort of dissension. They want identity politics. They want Muslims fighting with Christians. They want these protests on the street because they can come in and restore order on their terms. So I think this might play into what Justin Trudeau is doing. He's creating a bit of controversy. He's playing the other side of the field here. He wants more dissension involved. But I think the end result of this, unless we can stop this conflict, and I almost say, where's Henry Kissinger? Because he stopped the Mideast War 50 years ago. Right. But by God, something has got to be done to stop this thing before it not only becomes potentially a nuclear cataclysm, but before the globalists can exploit it to the point of saying only we can restore order in your countries. They're trying to do it again with the pandemic. They're trying to do it through the WHO, as you reported so ably recently. But they're also going to use this war in the Middle East as expertly as they always do, and as adeptly as they always do, to foster dissension and disunity amongst democratic nations. And we see this in the street. Who is winning in these confrontations? Who is winning? Nobody, except in the end the people who come up through the middle, and these are globalists. And Justin Trudeau might be just another pawn in their game, and he could be, just as Vladimir Zelensky is discovering, he could be completely dispensable when these global authorities say, you've done your job, we've used you up, it's time to move aside because we've got a larger game plan going on here. And I think that might have something to do with Trudeau's very bizarre decision to oppose the United States on this.
Well, we saw the same thing with Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand. When she's used up her usefulness, she's pushed aside by the World Economic Forum. That's happened to her as well. That's happened to Mark Rutte in the Netherlands as well. So these things happen on a fairly regular basis. Will Justin Trudeau be next? I'll get you out of here on this, David. Do you think that Justin Trudeau is reelected, or do you think he's done?
No, I do think he's done. And I think he might realize that. Whether or not he's going to resign in the next 2 years, or whether he will be defeated in the next election, I don't know. But I don't think he can win re-election. My only fear, as I've said before, if he can't win this in a reasonable legal way, I wonder if he will try to hold on to power in the midst of this crisis, and if he's deliberately sowing discord so he can justify extending the next election past 2 years, and if he might try to retain power through those means. In any ordinary circumstances, when we're not living in ordinary circumstances right now, we're living in a very, very unnatural world, Justin Trudeau could not win re-election. However, given the world events at the moment, and given the potential to exploit those world events, I think Justin Trudeau could well survive this crisis, but not in a politically proper or legal manner.
Proper or legal manner, but that's never been an issue before, following traditional and legal proceedings. David Creighton, great to see you. Thank you so much from Ottawa. We appreciate it as always.
Thank you so much, Clayton.
Have a great Thanksgiving as well, David. We appreciate it. And a lot of people in the chat said, yeah, great. Now that you've said this about Israel, please apologize to the truckers in Canada. Yeah. So he's taking such a fervent stand for, against Israel right now and against killing. Then what about taking away people's civil liberties and apologize to the truckers of Canada?
Right.
Will he ever apologize? I doubt it. We'll doubt it. Let us know in the comments below what you think about that. We've got more news to get to here on your Tuesday. We're going to be looking at what's happening at the White House, because they're really tackling the most important subjects of the day, which is Transgender Remembrance Day. Transgender Remembrance Day. Corinne Jean-Pierre took time out of her White House press briefing yesterday to remind all of us about the tragedy of transgender deaths in the United States, because apparently it's an epidemic and one that needs the White House's full attention right now. No mention about fentanyl.
Well, it's not a happy story. Obviously, it's sad when anybody gets murdered, but what they're doing will do nothing to prevent further murders other than make themselves feel good.
Odd, though, that she didn't take time out to talk about the massive child trafficking problem the United States has. No mention of that, or the southern border, or the fentanyl crisis, nothing like that. But we're going to talk about that tonight on the show with a whistleblower who alerted the Biden administration specifically about the child trafficking tragedy in the United States. We will get to that story in a moment. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Lear Capital. It's no secret. If you're tuned in, you know experts are predicting a recession heading our way in Q1 of 2024. Fingers crossed that they're wrong. I hope that they're wrong, but a lot of Wall Street analysts right now are predicting that the trickle of what we saw with higher inflation and layoffs and consumers pulling back on their spending and studying of the cardboard boxes. You know, there's a cardboard box metric. Do you know about this cardboard box metric?
No.
When the sale of cardboard boxes declines, that's because Americans simply aren't buying as many things. And I know it sounds like an anachronistic sort of way of measuring things, but it's a good indicator. And so the cardboard box metric right now is showing that Americans are actually spending less money right now. And that is ahead of a recession, possibly. And so right now, with the U.S. dollar in a sort of tailspin, we want to make sure that you are protected and you have a place to put your money, which is in precious metals. We are big believers in gold and silver. That's why we're seeing gold touching near $2,000 an ounce right now. Silver also up as well. Silver relatively cheap compared to gold right now. And we are big. We just bought a bunch of silver and we held it off site. And that's what Lear Capital can actually help you do. They can actually help you buy gold and silver, precious metals, and you can store it off site. Or if you'd like, you can have it shipped right to your door, gold, silver coins. You can store in your own safe if you like, next to your guns, wherever you store your precious metals, you can do that. Or again, have it stored off sites. And our friends at Lear Capital can help you do that. If you're interested in investing in gold, the folks at Lear will help you get started purchasing precious metals or converting part of your old IRA or your old 401k plan into a gold and silver IRA. All you need to do is call them. They're working today. They're working this week. So get on the phone with them. Just give them a phone call. They'd love to talk with you on the phone. Write this phone number down, 1-800-613-3557. Remember, every fiat currency in world history has collapsed. What makes you think the U.S. dollar will be the one that doesn't? So make sure, and gold and silver have sustained for 4,000 to 5,000 years. So it makes sense for you to put your money into gold and silver, and at least a portion of your savings into gold and silver. So call their 800 number, 1-800-613-3557, or go to LearRedacted.com, LearRedacted.com, and you'll receive up to $15,000 in free bonus metals with a qualified purchase when you work with our friends at Lear Capital. We thank them so much. We are thankful for our sponsors who support independent journalism. We are thankful for Lear. They're amazing, amazing company. In business for a couple of decades now. They have thousands of 5-star reviews. They are amazing. So our thanks to Lear for supporting independent journalism and supporting what we do here. So thank you to them.
All right. Well, are transgender people being killed left and right and in mortal danger of homicide? That's what the White House wants you to think. So they virtue signaled about caring about it without talking about any of the reasons that this happens or the rate at which it happens, which proves to you they do not care about it. They just want the optics that they care about it. So let's take a look. This is White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre saying that they pay tribute to the 26 transgender Americans who were killed this year.
Now, today, on Transgender Day of Remembrance, we grieve the 26 transgender Americans who were killed this year. Year after year, we see that these victims are disproportionately Black women and women of color. No one should face violence, live in fear, or be discriminated against simply for being themselves. As the president said, there's still more to do to meet the promise. And it's why this administration has taken urgent action to strengthen rights and protect the safety of transgender Americans and all LGBTQ+ Americans. As we mourn the loss of lives that have been taken too soon, we must also recommit ourselves to never stop fighting until all Americans can live free from the discrimination and also from hate.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
it's an epidemic, apparently.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, the Human Rights Commission has called it an epidemic, and they've labeled it as such. But what's interesting is that she's talking about grieving these 26 transgender Americans and making sure that they never fall victim to hate and discrimination. Except those are not the things that actually get those people killed. We're going to look at the real things that keep them killed. But let's just talk about this number for a second, because I can't stand it when people are innumerate, which means it's like illiterate, but you can't understand numbers when you're innumerate. 26 is not a very high murder rate for all of the millions of Americans out there. Let's compare it with some other things, which, as far as I know, do not have a National Remembrance Day from the White House. I just made a little list off the top of my head. 5,000 to 10,000 people per year die of choking There's no Remembrance Day for that. At least close to 2,000 people per year die of domestic abuse. There is a White House Remembrance Day for that. About 1,200 people per year die of jaywalking. That's a high risk. That's a relatively high risk. It represents, I think, about 30% of pedestrian deaths. So don't do it, first of all. And second of all, do we need to remember those people? What about electricity fires? 450 people per year die of that.
Yeah, in fact, 23 in New York this year alone now, thanks to e-bikes. E-bikes.
Oh,
literally.
yes, that's true.
So maybe there should be an e-bike Remembrance Day at the White House.
Yeah, you're almost just as likely to die from e-bike fires than you are being transgender. Construction worker accidents. That also is something that happens a lot. 109 people per year, according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. So when we are putting things in perspective of things that get commemorated by the White House in order to make them stop, 26 is a pretty low number.
Sherry
right?
Wilson in our chat says, what about Chicago every weekend? Yeah. Why don't you have a Chicago Remembrance Day every day? Because that's how many people are dying. Every Monday, you should have a Chicago Remembrance Day, because that's how many people just died in Chicago this weekend.
Now, that was just a short list of things that I, could think of. You can add your own, of course. The only thing on this list that the White House commemorates is domestic abuse, which they said last March, 2022, was September of 2022, domestic abuse awareness and prevention. So the rest of those items, the White House does not remember tearfully, nor do they make a press release saying that they're going to give more rights to the victims. Here's a statement from the president about Transgender Day of Remembrance, saying, there's no place for hate, discrimination. These are the kind of things that get people killed. But these are not the kind of things that get transgender people killed. So let's take a look. Now, what we're trying to look at here is a little bit hard to see because the White House doesn't give us a list of who is on those 26 transgender murders. But the Human Rights Campaign yesterday on this same Transgender Remembrance Day released this report saying that that number is 33. But they're using since November of 2022. So within the last year since Transgender Remembrance Day, there's been 33. So let's go with that. We have about between 26 and 33 deaths. Incidentally, the media took this report and ran with it and says, oh, yes, this is an epidemic because the Human Rights Campaign said so. Again, proving that the media is innumerate because 26 or 30 deaths does not an epidemic make. I look forward to their coverage of jaywalking then. Now, as for the list of these transgender victims, again, we can't be completely sure who they're counting and who they're not. So let's just look at some of the recent transgender murders. Let's start with 26-year-old Ray Musket, a biological woman identifying as a man who was shot by his girlfriend, a biological man identifying as a woman. So the girlfriend, which was a boyfriend, shot her. It's male on female violence, clearly. And then the boyfriend, dressed as a woman, also shot the boyfriend's own brother.
So that should be in the domestic violence category.
Absolutely, yes.
But instead, we've broken it out in a totally separate category now.
Yes, and the brother was killed by his transgender sibling. The brother gets killed.
Brother by her, him, he.
Okay. It's a boy who did the shooting.
Okay.
Okay. It's a transgender identified male.
So biological man.
It's a boy that did the shooting, killed his girlfriend dressed as a man.
Okay.
And brother, his own brother. So the brother of the shooter gets killed by a transgender person, but the brother does not get remembered. Only the person who got shot, who was cross-dressed, gets remembered. The brother doesn't get on this list or any White House love. And the transgender shooter also, I don't think is counted, but maybe is, again, because we're just not sure. Maybe that person who also killed and was killed should be remembered with honor. Again, this is male on female violence, but the media won't report it as such. Here's another one from the HRC list is Kaylee Lovelight, trans-identified man dressed as a woman. He shot his roommate which was a disabled man, the man down there at the corner. The disabled man, they were in a car, said that she came on to him, or he came on to him, depending on your pronouns. And the roommate died too, having been stabbed several times by this transgender person. So the person at the top shot the person at the bottom while they were in a car trying to make a pass and got shot in return. They killed each other in a car. So only one of those people will be remembered by the White House. Do you see what we're doing here?
Yeah.
Okay. Here is London.
Clown world.
Yeah. Here's London Star, the person on the left. This is a trans-identified man with boyfriend who goes by Bianca Davenport on the right. Excuse me. Bianca died at the scene in 2017, but London Star was left paralyzed and died this year.
Okay. Yeah.
Excuse me.
So once again, the White House is choosing to remember one person in this category and clearly ignoring the other side of this category. Again, this is the White House. This is the clown world that we live in. Let us know your thoughts.
Okay, I'm ready.
Oh, you are? Okay.
So the shooting happened after the pair invited a man to their home to pay for sex. And so that turned violent. The man said he shot them out of self-defense over a dispute over payment. So obviously, this is a dangerous situation that these transgender people are putting themselves into. They involve domestic abuse and sexual altercations. It's not like people are taking them off the streets and hurting them because they're dressed like this. One more we'll go with is Kitty Monroe, transgender man.
Not his real name.
No. Can you tell this story here?
Where are you? Okay. Where are you?
Right here.
Okay. So she
was shot.
Okay.
She was shot by the boyfriend when they were arguing about breaking up. The boyfriend says that she or he pulled the gun first.
Okay.
Okay. And then one more on the list is, go ahead, please.
I was just gonna say, it's so hard to follow because it's like he, she, no, she's like I can't even.
Here, it's clear to understand it. I'm sorry, I cannot understand it to save my life. And I see everyone in the chats like, I can't follow this. It's so confusing. I don't know. I don't even know what trans-identified man means.
Well,
I think on this show we should make an edict from now on in Redacted that we state their biology. This is a biological woman. This is a biological man. They can play whatever dress up they want and they can pretend to be whatever they want. But on this show, we are clearly stating they are a biological man. They are a biological woman. I think that helps us avoid confusion.
Okay.
Because I don't know what trans-identified even means.
But when I say trans-identified man is the biology. They're transgender. They call themselves transgender, but they are biologically men. Okay. I'm not using their ideology. And I don't also use their ideological pronouns.
I just don't know what if they're, okay. But anyway, they're a biological man.
Because if I say they're a trans woman, people take that to mean that I'm calling them a woman, and clearly they're not.
Okay.
Okay, and then the internet has a lot of questions if Audrey Hale is on this list. Clayton, tell them who Audrey Hale is.
Well, she's a woman, and the shooter who killed 6 people, including 3 young children at a Christian school before police shot her. Of course, she was all hopped up on testosterone. Remember that. The White House didn't say if she was on the list, but of course, she was honored by a lot of activists who came out, and instead of the 6 victims that day, they held up 7 fingers, remember, at the Capitol building in Tennessee to honor Audrey Hale, right? They reminded all of us that it wasn't just 6 people that died that day. Also, Audrey Hale was shot and killed by police, so we need to honor her as well. So we don't know. The White House didn't say if she was on their list, even though people are sort of asking Jean-Pierre on Twitter about this. We'll see if she actually responds to that.
Doubtful. Now, you can see a pattern here, right? A lot of these people are hurt because they put themselves into dangerous situations that involve either sex or their domestic partners. And, I think that it's worth remembering that a lot of times they're hyped up on pharmaceuticals that cause wild mood swings and erratic behavior. And they also they are also highly likely to be poor, so they don't have a lot of access to social help programs. By that, I mean a doctor who can see if these medicines are working well, maybe a therapist who can talk to them about some of the ways. So the White House is saying like, oh, well, now that we say this, you know that we can promote, like we can tune down your hate so that we can help these people. Well, really, if you want to help these people, you would address these issues, which is sexual deviance. That's dangerous, right? These dangerous sexually deviant situations that usually happen in the dark, in these clandestine places with gun violence. We need to talk about that. We can talk about how they are often drug fueled. And again, acknowledge that transgender hormones make people incredibly unstable and prone to violence. And you would acknowledge that transgender individuals, again, are more likely to be poor and have less access to good doctors and therapy that maybe they would need in order to avoid putting themselves in dangerous situations. Now, am I saying that every transgender person that gets killed put themselves in a dangerous situation? Clearly not. Clearly, some people are victims of hate, but the majority are not. One person on this list was killed literally while jaywalking at night. Presumably, we don't think the driver thought that they were transgender and hit them because of that, right? And so what are we doing here? Are we helping by using the White House as a platform for this? Does it actually help anybody if you're not going to talk about the reasons? Clearly not. If we're not going to talk about these reasons that made them unsafe, then it's just for the White House to pat itself on the back.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, there's a trans person walking down the street, they get hit by a car, and they're included in this statistic because they're trans. That's what they decided to go with.
Well, this specific instance was a hit and run, so maybe they can spin it as like, oh, they must have saw that he didn't look right in that skirt, and
it's kind of like the COVID deaths. Okay. They died in a car wreck, but they had COVID.
Yeah. Right. And if you look at the language that's sort of calling these people heroes, fallen heroes, as if they were living a brave life, and then, I mean, it sort of dishonors the struggle that they're living with. If you're the kind of person who is, in these domestic situations and you're stabbing other people over violent sex altercations, you're not a hero. You need help, right? Those are the kind of people we should help, not hold up and honor so that we get more of that. We need to talk about the ways that this is an unsafe and unstable way to live, in large part by a lot of people who don't have the support of maybe these sort of middle upper class transgender youth that are going to fancy clinics. This is something completely different. We pretend it's the same. It's clearly not. So it's almost as if the White House doesn't really care about transgender people with the way they talk. But I could be wrong. Let us know what you think of that in the chat.
Well, that's what just someone said in the chat. Christine Peach says White House would not do it if it helped anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a way to look at it. All right, we're going to talk about child trafficking here in a moment, because the White House certainly not talking about that. They will not talk about that at all, and they will totally ignore that. But we do have a store, and hey, guess what? Black Friday time. It's time for some great deals on some great hoodies and T-shirts and mugs. You can support independent journalism and what we do here on the show by going to redactedstore.com. That's our website. And check out our mugs, like our Friends Don't Let Friends Watch the Mainstream Media mug. Or our non-pacifist peace extremist T-shirt. We've also got hoodies and stickers and all sorts of great stuff over there. So check them out. We had some folks send us some nice tweets with their photos, and you can do that as well. David knows our Twitter address. So if you buy one of these mugs, T-shirts, mugs, hoodies, whatever, take a picture with it and then just tag us. Just tag our Twitter handle, David, which is
The Redacted Inc.
The Redacted Inc.
At The Redacted Inc.
At The Redacted INC on Twitter, X, or whatever you want to call it. So just tag us. If you pick up one of these mugs or T-shirts or hoodies, take a picture and send it and tag it there. And then we will feature your picture here on the show. We're going to collate a whole bunch of those photos and share them here on the show. So again, go to redactedstore.com. Once again, redactedstore.com. Well, America is the largest buyer and seller of children, unaccompanied children in the world. Every year, thousands of unaccompanied children are brought across the United States border. Then they're sold off as slaves, and worse, if you can even imagine worse than that. It's happening. Inside the United States, this is happening. Before they're transported by the U.S. government-funded agents, they're being housed in large facilities like the ones we've shown you, former Walmart facility buildings in Texas. Here, you can take a look at this on your screen. We've covered this on the show before. And it's all happening with the knowledge and supervision of the United States government. Either that or they're willfully ignorant about it. They are facilitating the transport and sale of these children across the United States. Now a group of brave Americans have blown the whistle on this program, and they are trying to raise awareness about how this program is about to become law in the United States, and it will circumvent the United States Congress. One of those whistleblowers is intelligence analyst with USCIS, an arm of DHS, Aaron Stevenson, I should say former intelligence analyst, but a whistleblower nonetheless. And Aaron joins us now on the show. Aaron, great to see you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
So how did you decide to blow the whistle and alert all of us to what was actually happening under the umbrella of the DHS?
So for me, it was because I exhausted all efforts at work. I started seeing the records about literal MS-13 members and 18th Street Gang members using this program to get kids. And it was a brand new thing. I had never seen this before in the entirety of what was called the Transnational Organized Crime watch list. And I asked to work about it where I worked at USCIS, and we, trying to find some information out like, hey guys, who works on this program? Who knows about this? And that's not the role at USCIS. So I reached out to other entities within DHS, CBP and ICE and other places, and no one knew about it. So I reached out to more members throughout the government at the Terrorist Screening Center, looked at the FBI, DOJ. I went to Labor and Treasury to see if anybody was tracking this information, and nobody was. So when I was looking for more people to help me out and no one knew about it, and everyone just kept saying like, well, it's not our job really, what we're going to do. It's like, okay, well then I'm left with no choice then. Like I have to go to the media. I have to get this out to someone is going to be able to, let people know what's going on, because I tried telling work. They just didn't want to hear it.
So you tried to tell the government what was actually happening. Can you explain to our audience what was actually happening, what program you discovered?
Well, yeah. So the program that I was working part of is called the Transnational Organized Crime Working Group. And this manages we call it the TOC watch list. And this watch list is not just like a DHS thing. The executive agent actually for it is DOJ, but it's a multi-agency, multi-department, whole of government approach to combat the activities of transnational organized crime groups. And what we did on a day-to-day basis, besides like help draft policy and try to, come up with ways to use this machine, we would get these encounter notices. An encounter notice is just it's a system of record. It's an email where anytime an alien who's watchlisted on this program, we would know about it. It's almost live feed. It wasn't like exactly like up to date that fast, but within a few minutes of, let's say an arrest record, or if an alien was going to be flying in the country, or if they were using USCIS for immigration benefits, we would know almost immediately what was it for. So we started doing this program back in 2016, and it kind of grew over time. And by the time in 2021, when we came across, this watch list was around like 30 to 40,000. And in February 2021, so the first month of Biden, there was an encounter notice about an alien who was MS-13 that was applying to HHS to get an unaccompanied alien child as their sponsor. And all of a sudden, that was the first time I've ever seen that. And I did check, by the way, all the records because I still had them all. So I did a control find search. I'm doing a query to look for everybody. And we started seeing basically one of these every about 3 to 4 weeks. And by the time I blew the whistle, which was in July of 2021, there was a total of eight aliens trying to do this. When that thing got released in August, there was 9. By the time I went public with something else, there was like 12 people. So this was a regularly occurring thing, but it was also brand new. The reason why it's so also insidious, though, is you can understand if this was a new thing, if it was only like one clique of a gang doing this, or like, let's just say like one sect of MS-13 from one part of El Salvador. That makes sense. But this started happening from gangs of MS-13, 18th Street Gang, and a Balkan organized crime group. So the countries this was coming from was Romania, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala. This was happening at a very, very wide rate very quickly, and it made no sense at all.
So these MS-13 gang members were trying to get access to unaccompanied minors that were already in the United States.
Correct.
And where were these gang members located? Were they also in the United States, or they were simply on a watch list somewhere outside of the United States?
So the other thing these people all had in common was they all first were illegal aliens. They all entered the United States illegally.
So they were.
But secondly, they were actually utilizing the defensive asylum process to stay in the country. So they were all illegal aliens. They entered without inspection, and you can be put in removal. Like ICE will find you, or CBP is like, hey, you can't do that. You're going to get removed. Here's your court record. And they make a bogus asylum claim. It's a very fraudulent process. And it's accepted by the asylum process. They just accepted things like mostly willy-nilly. And I'm talking like 80% of the time. So all these aliens, again, entered illegally and were utilizing the asylum process to stay in the country.
So they're staying in the country illegally, and then they're applying to get an unaccompanied minor child.
Correct.
It's so brazen to me. Here they've now gotten in, they've skirted the process, managed to use the asylum process, and then they're going back into the process to get a child.
Exactly.
And what are they doing with the child? It's shocking to me. And then what are they doing with the child? They're literally going through official channels to get a child?
Correct. And well, this is the part of it. So this is what child trafficking is. Because the U.S. government, we have definitions for everything, right? So the U.S. government, the definition for child trafficking is the use of fraud, force, or coercion to seize the custody of a child who's then moved for one of two purposes, which is either labor trafficking or sex trafficking. So a slave in like a factory or a sex slave. So this entire process, again, is all aware of too. Every single notice that came out about these 12 aliens that were trying to get these kids, these sponsors, every single one of them has a write-up also saying like, hey, this person's an MS-13. MS-13 is known for then drug trafficking, gun trafficking, extortion, sex trafficking. Like, it's no confusion to know that they are involved in this activity. FBI was known, they knew about this information because they received it. 12 members of the TAC working group knew about it, but HHS wasn't in this information. And even after blew the whistle, they are still not receiving this information.
So then this goes through what channel in order to receive a child? What agency? If I'm a member of MS-13 and I want to pick up a child, how do I go about filing this paperwork? I mean, it's unbelievable to me that there's an official process to go and pick up a slave.
You can do it within 14 days. Like 14 to 30 days is their rolling average. But this is all handled by the department, or HHS, Department of Health and Human Services. And the little ladder going down is the Administration for Children and Families, with ACF. And the actual office that handles this program is called the ORR, the Office of Refugee Resettlement. This program is called the Unaccompanied Child Program.
So this Unaccompanied Child Program receives a notice from an individual who has been flagged by your group as a terrorist and is a member of an international gang, an international terror gang, but they're not receiving the information to put a stop to it? Or does that paperwork just not even make it to them? So they say, oh, here's a request to pick up a child. We'll just send off this 5-year-old that we have here at this facility, and we'll send it off to this individual. And by the way, we'll make it easy on you. We will fly that person. We'll get on an airplane with U.S. taxpayer dollars and fly this child to this MS-13 gang member, excuse me.
Correct. Everything you said is true, except for one thing, which is HHS does not receive the information. And this is the problem too, because it's all unclassified. This is not like a secret, anything at all. This is not secret collection. There's no analysis which takes it to a secret or top secret level. This is all unclassified information that can be utilized over numerous government reporting systems. However, the actual case management teams are mostly contractors, so they don't have access to the information. But even then, like the federal field specialists, the actual feds at the sites of these kids, they're not receiving it either. And you hate to say it's by design, but it's by design. This is not a hard process at all. This is a very, very simple function of information operations. It's not hard to move information around, and yet they don't do it.
When you say it's by design, who do you think designed it and why?
Well, so it's HHS and their I would just say they're entities, because I doubt it's just a bunch of feds like GS-13s and 14s that are creating all the policies. This is probably more than likely a compilation of not only federal staff, but then also NGOs, non-government organizations, and also probably like contractors. They're the ones that do the majority of the work. So they'll have, the best practices. They'll know the way this works, and, we have to actually do these. So when they create field guidances, yeah, it's HHS distributing that. They're actually writing the law for that part, the policy for that. However, there's no way they're doing it just by themselves. So I would say absolutely it's coming from that trifecta of the organizations that are actually managing this thing. As far as the actual authority, though, it's HHS. They're the ones that have the ability to change field guidance, change policy guidance, change numerous things that they want to. One of those things they're doing right now, for example, is the rule change that they're doing. If the viewers are not known about this, a rule change is where an executive agency, like the Department of Health and Human Services, they can take a policy that they have and just say, hey, we're going to make some changes to this, or we're going to solidify this thing into law. And it literally becomes law. It's the executive branch having legislative authority. It's called administrative law. It bypasses Congress, never goes to committee. There's no floor vote, obviously, because it's not even being voted on. They just notify the public, like, hey, you guys have 60 days and we're going to, you can make comments on this thing, but this will become law whenever it is that we decide to.
Now, this is what you're trying to raise awareness about, of course, that this is going to sidestep Congress. What can people do about this in their own district? And I'm sure there's plenty of members of Congress that have no idea that this is even happening. But what can people do?
Well, I'm sure most of Congress probably doesn't know. But what you can do, this is the people, because this is the majority of the fight right now, is just human beings. I worked with a few people to go through this whole document. So this rule change that they posted, it's if you download it, it's 296 pages. And they just go through like the entire policy that they have. We're going to do this, we're going to do this, and this, and this. So what we did is we went through that. We took highlights that we saw that there was major problems in. We know there's corruption in those processes. We put the page number on there, and then we wrote a note saying like, okay, HHS they've shown an inability to detect, human trafficking patterns. Therefore, this policy should not become law. And we made that 94 comments out of 296 pages. So I worked with a couple of guys that basically can do website design, and they took all the information and they put it in a website, which if I can plug, is it okay?
Please. Yeah, share it. And I want all of our audience watching right now to please go to this website.
So it's truthtrench.org/defend the children. When you go there, it's going to show you like a little clock, which shows you how many days are left. And when you get there, you're going to see the clock. You scroll down a little bit. You can see like a video of how to, what the site is. That's a little, tutorial. And then you'll see a table of contents, comment number 1 through 10, comment number, 11 through 20. And you can do as many as you want. I've done all 94 more than once. And what we're going to do is you see a little red URL, just open that into a new tab. Look to the right, there's a copy button, which copies the entirety of that little section. Go to the page that you just opened. It's the Federal Register. Paste it inside of the comment box, and then you have to complete the little process. So click the anonymous box, click the CAPTCHA box, where it's like, how many fire hydrants are in the picture, one of those things. And then you submit, and you're done. And you can do this 94 times. You can do this process as many times as you want. And there's no limit to this. Like we've already got right now over 10,000 comments. Our goal is like kind of more like 50,000 comments, because we've seen before rules get shut down because so many people put in so many bad comments saying like, no, absolutely not. This is what this campaign does.
What could be more important than, first of all, stopping these terrorists coming across the border who are here and using this asylum process fraudulently, and then also protecting these children who are being shuttled across the borders and being used as sex slaves and worse, and being sold off in absolute horrible things that we've documented here on this show before. I mean, what more can you do if you've got a few minutes of your time to jump on the internet and do something like this so that make Congress aware that this is happening? Have you alerted, it sounds like you have, and with your whistleblower protection and then coming forward and sounding the alarm about this, you've told the Biden administration about this. What have they done?
Nothing. So all the policies that are in place are still in place. And that came out, by the way, 2 years ago. So this is not new information. And what I blew the whistle on specifically was, the amount of just fraud, the amount of the lack of operation, a whole bunch of things. like you could have made like probably 7 changes to the program just based on that alone. And there's more you can do that's, which is more classified, which is why I didn't release it. And nothing got changed. One of the biggest things is there is a cap on this watch list, by the way. So I'm sure you know about terrorists, right? And they have the terrorist watch list. There's no limit to that. There's over 1 million identities on the TSDB, the terrorist screening database. And that's that way for a reason, because there's a lot of terrorists in the world. Well, this TOC watch list, the Transnational Organized Crime watch list, this thing's capped at 40,000 entities. So there's no more than 40,000 people on this watch list.
Why is it capped?
It's like
just like an artificial cap? It's just a...
Exactly. It's capped because it was argued for by entities of the U.S. government. So I was there in these meetings, and I was actually on phone calls with our own counsel arguing against it, because the majority of the program is very enforcement minded. Again, this is like FBI, this is CBP, ICE. These people want to go after bad guys. And we were all arguing, like, do not put a cap on this watch list. Like, it's already working. We know how it works. We can manage it. Like, don't worry about it. But it was the lawyers, the general counsel for DHS proper, the Office of Chief Counsel for USCIS, and the DHS Office of Policy. That was the only elements, or those were the only elements that were arguing for, solidifying this watch list at 40,000, maybe increase it to 50,000, but it would go up in increments of 10,000 at a time. But the problem also was, if you were to make a claim for asylum, you were to come off this watch list. So the entire time it's growing, they're also flying off the watch list because they're utilizing the asylum process, which is why this is a really big deal. When I came forward in 2021, I was like, oh, wow, I did a little mathematical model of just how many border crossings there were, the size of these gangs in reality. And it's like, man, there's got to be like a couple thousand of these sponsors that are actually MS-13 members. This is pretty wild. And then when I met Tara Rodas, who's an HHS whistleblower, and she told me what she saw and the rate that they were going through, and it became realized like, oh my gosh, this is in the tens of thousands. And then when I talked to more whistleblowers, I talked to more like inside sources at HHS, they were confirming numbers that it's more like 35 to 45% of these kids are getting trafficked at the minimum. And so that number, 35%, is what we see now. People keep saying the 85,000 missing children, right? That number, first off, comes from 2 reporting periods, FY 2021, FY 2022.
So it's probably
that has
much worse by now.
More. As of right now, that has no data included from October 1st, 2022 through today. So that whole over a year right now is missing data. I can promise you the number of trafficked kids in that program for just these past 3 years, it's got to be north of 125,000, 150,000. I would not be shocked if it's about, honestly, probably closer to 200,000.
And these children, of course, are being housed in these facilities by contractor facilities that are being funded by, in large part, by the United States government. And then they get a call to transport one of these children. These contractors take the child to an airport, hand them off to these families. There's really only one follow-up phone call. And if they don't even get a hold of them on the phone, that's it. No more checkups. Really, we're done. We don't really have to. These wellness checkups are laughable. Where do these kids wind up? We have no tracking, really no reporting on this at all. And this is happening in the United States of America. The largest trafficker of children in the world is happening in the United States. So when people are on their way to the Target on a Saturday afternoon or going to their kid's soccer game on a Saturday afternoon, just think about how many hundreds of thousands of children are being shuttled around the United States right under our eyes. And there's no willingness, it seems like, either in part of Congress or the Biden administration to do anything about it. And it continues and it continues.
Correct. And this is, I hate to say it's every state, but it's basically every single state. Texas alone has like 52 of these facilities. Who, when they're all operating, who knows? Because they can open them up, they can shut them down. The contracts are fast and they're usually no bid. So it's very hard to get a control on this thing. And that's been kind of part of our thing too, is like, there's no way that HHS can be the sole authority for this information. It's like, if they're going to continue operating it, which is what we're against obviously as well, it's like that we have to figure out some way to expand the jurisdiction of information for the actual, all the cases, because this is really not hard to identify trafficking patterns. We know they've retaliated against it before because, again, there's brave women were there at Pomona, California, for example. They were finding these problems. They were able to go into the system, make simple queries. I mean, like, hey, this guy, like, he's changing his address and he's got like 16 kids right now. And this is part of the process. And there have been rule changes that HHS has done prior, which is to remove information collection of prior sponsorship. It's a major trafficking flag. And yet HHS has shown an inability to understand that, which again, this is why we're pushing back so hard, like just trying to get people to stop this from becoming law, because if it becomes law, it's gonna be much harder to fight. If the administration changes in 2025 and a president may come in and want to make changes right away, well, now it's a law. So that federal judge in Hawaii, that liberal judges, they can start fighting him on that ground too. So it might take 2 or 3 more years to get a hold of this program. If we can keep it where it's at right now, prevent the rule change from taking effect, you have the chance now to like make major changes of across the board at this point of what we can do with it. So this is why it's so important for people to go make their comments. And this is why we made the copy paste campaign. A comment can't just be like, hey, I'm Aaron, I hate you, HHS, send. That won't count that. It's got to be able to source policy. You got to be able to write to why it's a bad reason. You have to actually be able to do these things. So we provided that language. And if you want to alter it, go for it. No problem there at all. If they're smarter people, like please do so. But we just made a lot of them because the entire program, top to bottom, is just rot with corruption.
Well, I would encourage all of our audience right now watching to bookmark the website, write it down. You don't have to do it right now, but when you have an hour on your hands at nighttime, sit down with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, sit down with a spouse, a loved one, a partner, I don't care who, share it on Facebook, tell your friends, everyone should get it. Send an email and let them know to go to this website. Can you give the website? We'll put it up here on the screen once again.
Yep, it's truthtrench.org/defendthechildren.
All right, and we'll have it linked up in the description. We have it here on the screen, so pause the video, write it down, and take action on this. Aaron, thank you so much for blowing the whistle, being brave on this, and I'll get you out of here on this. Has the government come back at you at all for blowing the whistle? Have you gotten? Have you had to deal with a lot of crap as a result of it?
I mean, they fired me. But the best thing about that is, like during this whole process, because I blew the whistle on 3 things. I was not quiet once I saw the corruption.
So when you were fired, but don't you have whistleblower protection? I mean, isn't that exactly what whistleblower protection laws are supposed to do, to prevent that kind of action? We've seen the retribution on the part of the FBI agents, of course, who've been had their lives ruined as a result of coming forward and talking about the corruption at the FBI.
Yeah, I mean, they've got their ability to do whatever they want to do. They can say I didn't follow whatever procedure. However, I followed enough of it, and if I went the slow route, we wouldn't be here today. We'd be, 6 months behind it, in my understanding. But the best thing is, when they fired me, they only said we don't trust you anymore. They never told me I was lying. They never said I was wrong. They didn't say I just, I was gone crazy. It was just, we don't trust you anymore, and this is, sorry, but you're gone now. So, there's nothing wrong with that. I can't be upset. That's not a thing to be upset about. So, yeah, I lost my career, but I'm doing this now, so I'm happy.
Well, you're a hero, and you're saving lives, and so.
Well, everyone that makes comments is doing so as well. So please make comments, and I thank you all.
Aaron, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
And our thanks to Aaron. Thank you so much for that. And our thanks to all of you for being a part of this community here and seeking the truth. We don't have all of the answers, but we're seeking the truth together. And I just want to take a moment and thank all of you. Of course, the show will be dark for the next few days here while we are enjoying the Thanksgiving holiday. We hope that you are enjoying it as well with your family, loved ones. And I want to thank you all for an amazing year and amazing support of what we do here on Redacted. We do have our Redacted Plus Club. And I'd love for you guys to sign up if you'd be so kind. The show is totally free, of course. You don't have to pay anything to watch this show. We just have a few sponsors per show. Hopefully you guys can deal with those for 35, 45 seconds per show. That really helps support what we do here. But also we are supported by you, and we wouldn't be able to do this show without you. So we do have a Plus Club. We would love for you to join our Redacted Plus community. Just go to redacted.inc. And for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support what we do here. We have exclusive content. We're launching our live streams and our private club, our book club that Natalie's going to be launching here very, very soon once the holiday is done. So that'll all happen inside of the Plus Club. access to interviews before anyone else gets to see them, and exclusive content and live streams as well. And it's just a way to support independent journalism. So thank you guys so much. Anyway, thank you guys for a very important week of news. We really appreciate it. Thank you, all of you, for joining us, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We'll see you back here right after the holiday. Have a great night, everyone.